Hello again, we meet again and again. Surprise, surprise, with a book, still with this little one, Discovering Ghosts by Metcalfe, 1972. I never found it the once, like I said. I was just having a look at that one house there, Burton, Agnes Hall. This one. Burton Agnes Hall, Yorkshire, was the home of Anne Griffith, who so loved the place that she asked for a skull to be kept in the house after her death. Good heavens. Let's have a look what it's got to say about this. The girl who loved her home. I was sitting comfortably, then I'll begin, but first, a spot of the old lubrication. The early 17th century Burton Agnes Hall lies midway between Driffield and Bridlington in the East Riding of Yorkshire, set back off the A166. In the grounds of this beautiful old house is the original Norman Hall, dating from 1173. What about that? Sir Henry Griffith, the builder of Burton Agnes Hall, had 3 daughters. There is a portrait on view in the hall showing all 3, the youngest of whom was Anne. Anne was a kind, sensitive girl who had been delighted with the building of their new home. She eagerly awaited its completion, and she loved the place so dearly. It had not been finished long when Anne took a walk with a dog across the countryside to visit some acquaintance of Harpen Hall, a mile away. No doubt she discussed with her friends there the joys of living in the new house. In the evening she began a journey home, meeting on the way some itinerant mendicants, or world rangers as they were called in Yorkshire, or gypsies I should say rather, who asked for alms. As she took off her glove to open her purse, which alms was a bit of that, you see, terminology for cash in those days. As she took off the glove to open her purse, she revealed a valuable ring on her finger. Seeing this, the rangers clubbed and robbed her. She was found unconscious later that night and carried back to the hall. Before she died 5 days later, she begged the sisters to preserve her skull and to keep it in the hall which she loved so much. To humour her in the last hours, they agreed to her request, but when she died, her complete remains were buried in Burton Agnes Church. Burton Agnes Church. They followed a very noisy. There followed a very noisy and disturbed period for the inhabitants of the hall. Well, she was restless, she said. She obviously asked for a skull to be left in the hall, and they didn't comply with that. And can you imagine the implications there? And they buried her whole, and the spirit of Anne didn't like it. So let's carry on with the story to see what happens, eh? That's the beauty of these, you never know what's around the corner with them. There followed a very noisy and disturbed period for the inhabitants of the hall. There were crashes and groans and the loud slamming of doors. The vicar of St. William's and Quentin was asked for his advice, and he suggested that Anne be exhumed and a skull placed in the hall as she had requested. The advice was accepted and the body was exhumed. When the coffin lid was raised, the body appeared intact, but it was surmounted by a grinning skull. The skull was carried reverently into the hall, and peace came to Burton Agnes. You can imagine that. Only on 2 occasions has this piece been shattered. Once when a cleaning girl threw the skull out of the window and it landed on a horse-drawn manure cart. The horse refused to budge an inch until the skull had been removed and replaced in the hall. The second occasion was when the Burton family owned the hall and the skull was taken out into the garden and buried. The original noises and groans recommenced, to cease only when the skull was brought inside again. The last that was heard of the skull was that it had been bricked up in the walls of the hall, so that there would be no chance of it straying again. No record of where the skull rest was kept, but wherever it is, the spirit of Anne Griffith remains quiet and peaceful. Well, that's the first time I've read that. And it's difficult to read these all the way through without any mistakes. So you must forgive me for making a few mistakes. But I'll tell you what, you can imagine all of that. There was another one as well, the Screaming Skull, where the skull was kept in a house. And if it was moved, the owner of it didn't like it. And things started to happen. Powerful things, apparently. Nice to see you again. Discovering ghosts. Come and have another little listen. There's still a few more stories left. See you again. Bye bye.